Yeah, hello and welcome. My name is Petra Hoffstaedter and my co-presenter is Kohn. And together we would like to introduce you to Gamified telecollaboration paths in the TeCoLa virtual world. And we would like to show you how teachers can use the TeCoLa virtual world and its learning stations and learning paths to engage students in authentic and hopefully motivating tasks for telecollaboration for collaboration, intercultural communication with students from different countries.
Well, and it's all about enriching foreign language learning by creating spaces for intercultural communicative competence development with facilities for promoting authenticity beyond the classroom, or as some people would put it, language learning in the wild, out there. We strongly believe that intercultural telecollaboration has an exciting and innovative potential, pedagogical potential for supporting authenticity beyond the classroom, for making language learning in the wild possible. Intercultural telecollaboration in the sense of chatting, forum activities of course, but then collaborative creation with tools like Padlet, and of course interacting in video communication environments or in virtual world environments. Now in this presentation and in the workshops today, our focus is on a specific part or dimension of intercultural telecollaboration, namely our TeCoLa virtual world, where learners and teachers are represented by their avatars, and where they engage in authentic intercultural communication and collaboration across country and culture boundaries. That is, communicative interactions between students of different lingua-cultural backgrounds, say from Spain and France and the UK or Germany. As regards the pedagogical approach, in addition to tandem exchanges, we in TeLa also pursue the lingua franca approach, which means that the interacting students use their common target language, be it French or German or English or Spanish, use their common target language for communicating with each other, which makes them sit in the same boat, as it were. And previous studies we have conducted on this pedagogical lingua franca condition shows that students remain focused on the language. They want to get it right. But they want to get it right in the service of successful communication and interaction. And they help each other. And they develop rapport and a cooperative spirit, empathy, and these things. And this is something we want to focus on in this environment in particular.
Thank you. So, intercultural language learning in the TeCoLa virtual world emerges very much around learning stations and learning paths. So you will wonder, what is a learning station and what is a learning path in the TeCoLa virtual world? And this is something that we will now explain a little bit and later also show you. So learning stations are maybe 2 or 3 boards in the TeCoLa virtual world environment, like you see here on the screen on the left. And learning paths are also boards, but it's in a way several learning stations that are distributed in the virtual world in a usually fixed order, in a fixed thematic sequence. And on these station boards, they show whatever is required for a specific task. Yeah, this could be text passages, it could be pictures, it could be a link to a video, and so it would be questions and instructions. So now, how then would students interact in this environment using these learning stations and learning paths? Students meet in pairs or small groups at a learning station in the virtual world. And they talk to each other through avatars. Yeah? They can talk, they can really talk, so students will be able to hear each other's voices. They can send text messages, and they can interact with each other. On the learning stations, they have these boards, and they follow the instructions on the boards. They talk about the issues addressed. They might also have to solve a problem, always depending on the task. They could even create things together. Yeah, like, for instance, using then Google Docs at the same time as they are in this virtual world. And of course, they can also take notes. They could do that on printed worksheets that they get. Or they could also do that collaboratively, again, using, for instance, Google Docs, so that they, in the end, have a collaborative result of what they have done. And we also have a special kind of learning station, or special kinds of learning station, which are quiz stations or quiz boards, or which students can use. For instance, these quiz stations could be at the end of a learning path, then, to enable student teams to discuss and collaboratively to answer the questions answer questions to check what they have learned. What you see here on the picture is a quiz chair. So the team members sit on the individual chairs, and they discuss and collaboratively answer questions that appear on their screens. And so whenever they get an answer correct, the student seat moves up one notch. So this is a very interesting thing for students to do, but they could also have little learning boards that are next to an individual station where they have to answer a question, and we will demonstrate that later this afternoon, how this really looks in the virtual world. Okay, so we have created a number of learning stations and learning paths in this project already, and for Spanish, for French, for German, and for English. But of course, this might not be exactly what you want to have for your students. And therefore, we find it very important that you as teachers will be able to create your own content or to adapt things that have been developed. And this is possible because we have the content of these learning boards. For the content, we use online documents like Google Docs or Google Slides, Google Presentations, and you see an example here. This is just a Google Docs document. And with the Gamified authoring tools developed by our partner Nick Swart, you will be able to project these contents to the board in the virtual world. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, what do we mean by gamified telecollaboration? We would suggest that you look at what little children do. You're all familiar with these simulations and make-believes when they play doctor or play mom and dad and these things, and they go through all the motions. they gamify things. Now, what do they gamify? They actually gamify the real world. And through gamifying it, they make it simpler in a way. They reduce it with the purpose of making it accessible for them, manageable for them, for practicing certain activities that are of interest and then maybe later of value for them in the real world. So gamification in our TeCoLa virtual world environment refers to gamifying, reducing, making accessible, manageable certain real-world activities that are pedagogically desirable as targets, objectives of learning. Pedagogical gamification involves, roughly speaking, reducing real-world activities, creating a protected space for controlled real-world immersion, for safe practice and safe learning. For those of you who are familiar with the social-cultural approach to language, to learning and education in general, Vygotsky, this is a zone of proximal development, which learners can then use to further expand their abilities. Now, in real life, we want to be successful. We want to be happy with what we do. In our virtual world environments, of course, we can also see whether our communication with our partners is successful or not. And we want to be successful. And we have observed that students, well, try to be successful. In addition to this, we integrate game elements like the chair, the quiz chair you have just seen, but also assessment activities that are different from traditional assessment activities, where you do assessment for getting a certain score, but rather assessment that supports learning, assessment for learning, sort of through self-evaluation, self-reflection, peer evaluation, collaborative reflection, teacher feedback of this kind. So all this helps to enable students to have the experience of satisfaction and success. Now, this being grounded in real-world activities makes our virtual world interactions potentially authentic. Or let us rather say that learners find it easier to authenticate what they are doing. And this contributes to learning, to motivation.
So far we have talked very much about the virtual world and using the virtual world, but and also the focus now later will be very much on, well, will be on the virtual world. But we should not forget the other tool options that Christy already mentioned as well, that we have available. So it's not only about one tool, but it's about tasks, engaging tasks, and we can also combine different tools. And we could even use different tools for the same task and use it as for the purpose of differentiation for different students. So for instance, if we look at the learning stations in the virtual world, so it's for synchronous communication through an avatar. I mean, they can talk, they can write, everything, but it's through an avatar. Whereas, for instance, then in video communication, students see each other, yeah? And then, but it's also, again, it's synchronous communication, only now with this face-to-face, in a way, possibility. Then there are other tools, asynchronous tools, like, for instance, a Padlet wall. I don't know, who of you knows Padlet? Yeah, some of you do. Yeah, it's a very interesting tool, and I think it's even, well, by now it's even possible to have audio recordings, video recordings. So, but the interesting thing is that it is asynchronous. So students don't have to be there at the same time. And this also has a certain advantage sometimes if you think of differentiation. So some students might find, if we now look at these three options here, some students might prefer to see the partner, yeah, and find this more motivating, actually seeing whom am I talking to. Others might think, no, they find it more attractive and more motivating to be able to interact in a virtual world. They might find very exciting. Or they might also think, okay, I find it nice to be able to hide behind an avatar. It's a bit more anonymous. And then there are, of course, students who say, well, I'm not really up to synchronous communication right now. I would need some time and support to prepare what I'm going to share with my international team partners. So they could use an asynchronous tool like Padlet and could prepare what they want to share with the others beforehand, maybe even in the classroom with a classmate, and then put it online afterwards. So there are these different possibilities which allow for scaffolding and offer a lot of opportunities for differentiation. Yeah.
So, and now we come to this important question of implementing a TeCoLa telecollaboration exchange. This is where you come in, the teachers, together with their students. So, in our case, it is all about intercultural communication and collaboration between students from different countries. That is, typically, two teachers with their two classes and their students meet, a class in Germany, a class in France, and the students learn English. And the purpose is that the students are given the opportunity to communicate in a more natural way in English with other non-native speakers of English. Now, all this is, and we feel, needs to be guided by the teachers. Some teachers may feel that the young people, they are so familiar with mobile phones and tablets and whatnot, and they don't have to be told how this can be used or should be used. But this is different. This is not using these tools for these purposes young people might be used to, but it's meant to be used for pedagogical purposes. And initially, students might be excited and interested of being able to use these tools in the, for them, otherwise boring school context. But the second and third and fourth time, well, it's back to doing things for which they need some kind of guidance and support. So teachers need to, the two teachers need to collaborate with each other quite closely regarding the learning objectives and the pedagogical approach. And in a few minutes we will hear more about these things from a teacher's perspective when Corinne comes here to this place. And the teachers need to adapt existing TeCoLa tasks or create their own ones. They need to involve their students maybe in the task design process. They need to form pairs and small groups of students for the telecollaboration exchanges, because these are not activities between large groups, but between pairs or small groups of 3 or 4 students. That is when it works most effectively. And this needs to be pedagogically organized and accommodated with classroom activities. The teachers need to prepare their students for the telecollaboration exchange, and they need to continuously moderate their students' telecollaboration activities. And they need to provide follow-up activities in class. So certain things happen in the telecollaboration exchange, and then students take outcomes back to the classroom, where they present things or discuss things, further explore things. Well, and in this process, you, the collaborating teachers, will be supported by a team member from the TeCoLa project. This brings me to the workshop this afternoon at 3:45. All participants, that is you and the streaming participants who join us online here, are invited to attend this workshop, which will be a kind of presentation discussion workshop in English and in French here in the lecture hall. In addition, we will contact you, all of you, the local people here and the online people, regarding TeCoLa webinar workshops in the next few weeks or months, or whenever you are available and want to know more, and where you can join us in smaller groups to see more of the TeCoLa virtual world and maybe of other tools we have available. In the workshop this afternoon, you will get a more thorough immersion into what is possible in the TeCoLa virtual world, and I'm sure then many of you will be interested in joining us in a webinar. While you are waiting, you have the TeCoLa website and the open educational resources, the OER, where you find background material, tasks you can look at. And the more you browse all these things, the better for the webinar workshops later, because then you have your own questions and we can discuss things in greater detail. Thank you very much.
Hello, we have a question from one of the people online. Carrie, I'm sorry if that's not the right pronunciation of the name. She says, I'm impressed with the approach, but how can the learner context be integrated?
The learner what? Context.
The learner context, how can that be integrated?
It would be interesting to know now what learner context means in this question.
I don't know whether.
So let me see. I think the great advantage is that when you compare communication in a classroom, that is communicating with my a friend or mate in the same native language, of the same native language, and now we have to do it in English or in Spanish, whatever the target language is. And this has some possibilities, but it also is to some extent maybe awkward, maybe artificial. Okay, and what do you talk about? Well, you have a certain topic which is set by the teacher, and now you have to do this kind of simulation and these things. As I said, this has its values, but it has its pedagogical limitations. And this is where these intercultural telecollaborations come in. They make it possible that students from different countries and cultures, they meet They meet with each other with their own interests and maybe their own topics they want to discuss. We have noticed this in the past, that they started discussing the topic that was agreed on in class. Well, and then they continued, and they talked and talked, and afterwards they made an appointment in Facebook. And I think this, well, could be an aspect of sort of bringing the context of the learner into the play. So this is how I would understand this. Any other questions here from the audience?
Yes,
Yeah, bring the mic.
I'm very interested in the concept of authenticity, and thank you for giving some tools to define this concept in your context. Would you say that there are any contexts where communication would be inauthentic, or can we expand authenticity to all forms of communication in any situation?
Well, this is indeed a very interesting question, and well, as many of you know, it's a hot topic. What is authenticity and what is authentic? Now, I think for us, it is very important to point out that, well, authentic in the sense of something occurs out there in the real world, well, that is one understanding, and it's a more traditional understanding of authenticity. And something that occurs out there doesn't need to be, well, relevant or interesting for me. And this is where the other understanding of authenticity comes in, which has been introduced by Henry Widdowson. Authentication. Is it authentic for me? Am I, as a learner, able to make a certain activity or a certain topic or a certain context authentic for me? That is authentication. And we would argue that our TeCoLa environment helps to support authentication processes.
Thank you. D'autres questions?
En français, excusez-moi. Et je voudrais savoir si, pour vous, il faut que tout l'établissement soit, disons, intéressé. C'est-à-dire, on peut travailler, un professeur peut avoir cet intérêt et les autres pas. Ça fonctionne en groupe, tout l'établissement, ou ça peut être seulement un seul prof.
Merci pour votre question. Est-ce que je réponds tout de suite ou je traduis? Donc la question c'était de savoir est-ce que TeCoLa fonctionne. Sorry. The question was about TeCoLa. Does it function as for the whole school, or is it just for teachers, for classroom in the classroom, or is it really implying the whole school to develop this kind of telecollaboration? So that was the question. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's for individual teachers who can join. Yeah. So if one of you wants to join, then you can do that, and we will try to find a partner's teacher for you with their classes. Yeah.
Voilà, donc c'est pas uniquement l'établissement, ça peut l'être, mais c'est vraiment les enseignants qui sont partenaires de ces échanges.
Or if you have someone already, if you have a partnership within your school that you know other teachers you would like to work with, that would also be possible. Yeah, if you bring your partner with you. Yeah.
J'avais une question justement. Est-ce que c'est vous qui trouvez les partenaires à l'étranger? Ou est-ce qu'il existe, comme sur eTwinning, une base de données infinie de collègues déjà enregistrés dans partout dans le monde que l'on peut du coup questionner nous-mêmes.
Okay, so she would like to know about if we have a kind of platform with a lot of teachers that she can contact for developing telecollaboration, just like in Twinning. So that's the question.
Yeah, so we already have a network of teachers, but not to compare with the number of teachers that you have in eTwinning. So it's something that is growing, but you could also, if you are in eTwinning, for instance, you could also look for a partner in eTwinning. Yeah, so every possibility that is available could be used to find a partner. And so we would like to help you and try to help you finding a partner, but if you have other opportunities, you can join with a partner teacher and partner class.
I would like to add with regard to eTwinning. So TeCoLa is not in opposition to eTwinning. It's kind of complementary, like when you are engaged in an eTwinning exchange, well then you use tools that are outside the eTwinning platform, like Padlet for instance. And in this way you could use tools available from TeCoLa in an eTwinning context. So this is like enriching eTwinning, because the advantage, for instance, in eTwinning you have video conferencing, but you have video conferencing for the entire group. And with our big blue button, we can set up as many video conferencing rooms, well, as you want in a way. So we set up rooms for partnered teams of students or small groups of students for their individual and more private exchanges. So this has an advantage and can be used within eTwinning. Yes, so
so we have to stop with the questions for now, but there will be a lot of opportunities to discuss further. So maybe we hand over now to Corinne.